All right, it's 6:46. I'm gonna call the meeting to order. Nice to see everyone. We're gonna start with our consent agenda. We've got our February 1st minutes, and we have no policy readings tonight. Any discussion, questions, concerns about the prior minutes? Okay. I'll make a motion to accept the consent agenda. We'll do that by roll. Kat?
Aye.
Erin?
Aye.
Lisa?
Aye.
Miranda?
Aye.
Arlene?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
And Mary is an aye. We are going to reprioritize the flow of the meeting, and Lynn will go before Morgan after the school spotlight. I do not believe we have any visitors, certainly not in the room. Morgan, no one virtually?
Nope.
For public comment, okay. So that brings us to Rhoda with the school spotlight.
So for this time around for the school spotlight, I just did some short little videos that Marty put together for me in one little video of a lot of different learning opportunities. So you're gonna see second grade, and they're doing some writing, they're a report writing, and in the video you'll see them learning how to take notes on the things that they're interested in and gonna write about. And then in third grade, there are 3 different kids who talk about different things that they're learning. One of them talks about health class, and the 2 others I think are literacy. Then 7th grade is also working on writing and opinion writing, and they talk about their writing projects. And then there's a short, very short, nobody talks in it, but it's a STEM video, 2 kiddos who are at different grade levels, but come together at a time when they both are free with the art teacher and are working on a STEM project with her. And you'll see what they built as they're trying it out. And then there's a little bit on our kindness week at the end of it. So with that, I'm gonna let Morgan play the video, hopefully.
So I'm looking for it. Still knows in the agenda.
Yes.
It's news to me.
Surprise.
It's there.
Aaron just put a note in there. I don't know what it said though. I saw something flash.
I am writing about note-taking topic, and what I'm reading about is poison about frogs. That's so cool. Okay, aloha. Okay. something going on over here. Sled dogs? Yeah. Over here? I already did mine. Sharks? Nice. Hey Zach, what have you been working on? I finished, so I was working on guinea pigs. Nice. Awesome. Will that fit on one of your subtopics? Siberian tigers. Oops. I know. Siberian tigers are the biggest cats in the world. It said they're not. Are the biggest cats in the world. Right. Where would that fit? Body. Body, that's right.
It's funny because when I listened to it, I couldn't hear all that background noise.
To get to the dictionary without having to just flip through every single page, you can just flip through the book and then find where you were the word you were looking for. Like, as an example, hippopotamus, if I knew hippopotamus where both letters in the H would be like next to it.
Alright, go for it.
In health class, we learned about the skeleton head, and it is called the cranium. I learned how to read better in third grade, and I know how to read better, and I know how to read chapter books better. I was up for 2, and I'm on chapter 5 on this one, and this one's really
Okay, so in ELA, I've been working on my argument writing. An important thing I've learned was to take my time. And we were graded on writing clear reasons with claims and relevant evidence. My final product was my essay on summer homework, and I think it did pretty good. If I'm being honest, I think I did the best I could.
We worked on writing a full page or 2 argument essay. Something I took away from this unit is when you are gathering info for your essay, you should take your time and get lots of info for a good essay. The standard we are being assessed on is writing arguments or claims with clear reasons and relevant evidence. And the goal of this unit, for our final project of this unit, was an essay on why peanut butter should be allowed in school. And I think mine turned out pretty good. We've been practicing with argument writing some major projects in our final essay and our argument essay. A couple key points are creating a counterclaim, reasons of evidence, and a conclusion. The standard I'm being assessed on is write arguments to support claims with clear reasons and relevant evidence. The final product was my final essay. In my final essay, I argued that pro athletes are paid too much money. Last year, working on argument writing. Some key points of writing arguments are to have reasons to support you. You also need evidence. The standard I was assessed on was writing arguments, clear reasons plus evidence. My final essay was on why high school athletes should be tested. That's a lot about here. I've been working on writing my argument essay. One thing to know about this is to take your time. I was assessed by my essay had clear reasons and evidence. I created an argument essay about how the Boston Bruins are the best team in the NHL, and I think they win that.
Hey, so I noticed you guys are filling something out. What are you doing?
Nominating
doing that during lunch, so a little chaos right there.
What, I missed it was one part, what did the boy say, high school athletes should?
Drug
be
tested.
Yeah,
Okay, I
that's right.
couldn't,
Yep,
in
drug
the end.
tested,
I
yeah.
thought he was gonna say like they should be paid or something.
No.
Nope.
That's all I
That's
have.
great.
That's great, thank you so much, Rhoda. And I just wanted to welcome, we have a visitor now, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, did you come to just observe, or would you
Yes.
like to comment? We had a public comment window, I'd be happy to circle back if you,
I'm very interested in what the things are to offer kids.
great,
I work with kids, a lot of kids, so I
okay,
live here in Bakersfield.
wonderful.
So I'm Rosalie Williams, sorry.
Oh, okay, nice to meet you, Rosalie, thanks for being
We're
here,
glad you're here.
great.
Glad to be here. Sorry I'm late. I thought I could do a Zoom, but I don't know how to get on the link.
We can help you at the end, figure that out for next time.
Well, I know how to do Zoom, but I didn't know where the link was.
Okay, thank you. So Lynn, I'll turn it over to you now.
Okay. Morgan has my slideshow. So we'll start off with personnel. Nothing has changed since your board packets went out, so I won't read all of what is in there. There are some things under personnel that are for action. So for hiring, although you were part of the hiring process, we don't have it. For Terry Sue Hitchcock, I'll just need you to make a motion to hire Terry Sue Hitchcock to be the principal of Sheldon.
Make that motion.
Great, thank you, Miranda. We'll do that by roll. Lisa,
Aye.
Erin,
Aye.
Kat,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Miranda.
Aye.
Arlene,
Aye.
and Mary is an aye.
And then resignations, there are two actions under resignations. The first, both are in Berkshire. The first is Leonard Bedell, principal, and Michaela Hull, grade 1 teacher. So I would ask the board to make that motion to accept the resignations.
I have a quick question. I know we were choosing a new principal. I didn't realize like he was resigning now. I thought that was going to be till end of the school
He
year.
is, it's the end of the school year.
But he has to do it now. We have to vote on it now. He has to.
Yes,
resign.
you're accepting it for effective July 1.
Okay.
So he'll work through June 30th.
And because there is a deadline, am I correct in believing that like that he has to do it by, or does timeline matter?
The timeline matters, and I certainly appreciate Mr. Bedell coming forward when he did, because hiring timeline matters a lot,
Okay.
especially for administrators. So I do think he recognized that and was kind enough to give us as much notice as he could.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Great, all right, I'll make the motion to accept those two resignations by roll. Lisa,
Aye.
Erin,
Aye.
Kat,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Miranda,
Aye.
Arlene,
Aye.
and Mary is an aye.
So in terms of open positions, we're gonna be talking a little later about the timeline for the Berkshire principal hiring. I put that under other because I did omit that in my agenda. So we'll talk about that. We have teacher positions that principals are already busy, hard at work, trying to interview candidates, getting them in to teach some lessons and doing reference checks. So there's a lot of that going on already. We also have the Dean of Students position at Sheldon that's open, and and we've had a lot of hiring that we've been doing, and we really can't manage more than 2 searches at once out of our office. So now that we've concluded one last week, we've got Berkshire starting tomorrow. The committee meets for the first time, and then we'll shift into the Sheldon Dean position. So you'll get more information about that coming soon. And nothing under student this month, other than a cute picture. The next part that I want to talk about is the Sheldon Elementary population growth. I know I've come to you and I've talked already quite a bit about what the needs I've identified in Sheldon. And I don't know that I've been explicit enough and been able to give a full picture of how the need differs there than it does in some of our other schools. So some of this data, I apologize, is a little bit repetitive, but I'm gonna say it anyway just to set some context. So for you all know that Sheldon became a member of Franklin Northeast and the NMVUUSD school district in 2019, school year 2018-19. So since Sheldon has come to us, school year 19-20, July 1, 2019, Sheldon's population has is skyrocketed. They have increased their number of students by around 50 since they first arrived in FNESU. So we've seen pretty significant growth, and Morgan's been doing population enrollment trend lines for a while for us, and he's pretty savvy and is usually pretty close to target when it comes to those projections. So what we see in Sheldon is something that is different than what we see in the other 3 towns at NMV. We're seeing slight decline in Bakersfield. It's just not a steep decline, just kind of very gradual, slow decline. In Montgomery, we saw a little drop off, really. I think that was pandemic related. We saw a spike, and now we're starting to see a little bit of a decline. Same in Berkshire. We're seeing kind of a slow decline there. Nothing that has me worried about too much of a population drop, but Sheldon's got the inverse happening, where they're on the path for a pretty steep incline. So we have some things that I've asked you to consider now, and then we're going to have future conversations about Sheldon as well if those projections play out. So on the next slide, I'm just giving you some data in terms of the current school enrollment. So this is as of today, what's in our power school. Your 4 schools are the pre-K through 8 schools. So Sheldon serves 332 students. They are much bigger. I think it's deceptive when you walk into Sheldon. There's still this small school feel when you walk in there because there are these wings and you can't really see or get a sense of how large the school actually is. So they're comparatively our largest school in FNESU. We have 144 in Bakersfield, 190 in Berkshire, and 153 in Montgomery. So I took a look on the next slide at what do our middle schools look like across FNESU. So I just looked at the first bit of the data on top is just how many students are in the 6th grades, the 7th grades, and the 8th grades in each of our buildings. Then I took the total number of middle school students who are enrolled in each of our 4 schools. And then I took the number of core content teachers in each school. So your math, your ELA, your science, and your social studies in each school. So Montgomery and Bakersfield have 3 middle school teachers, and Berkshire and Sheldon have 2. So then I looked at, given the number of teachers we have, what are the student to core teacher ratios? This isn't taking any elective teachers into consideration. This was really just to look at how many staff are teaching how many students in those core content areas. So the ratio in Bakersfield is about 1, if I wanted to round up, it'd be 1 to 15. In Berkshire, 1 to 16. In Montgomery, 1 to 14. So they're pretty close, those 3. In Sheldon, it's 1 to 23. So it's pretty substantially different in terms of that student to teacher ratio. So the total for NMV, when I put it all together and I look at, okay, our total number of teachers overall is 14. We have 244 students in our middle school, and we divide that out, it's about 1 to 17 teachers. But it's different because Sheldon, there's a big discrepancy between Sheldon and Bakersfield and Montgomery in particular. So the idea that I proposed previously that the board has been in support of is hiring 2 additional middle school teachers for next year for Sheldon. So I looked at what would Sheldon's middle school numbers look like next year. So looked at this year's 5th graders, 6th graders, and 7th graders to project the numbers for next year. So I'm anticipating they'll have 95 students in the middle school. So if we are able to hire and we can have 6 teachers for those 95 kids, we would get our ratio to 1 to 16, which is right within the range. That's right where Berkshire is And it's still a couple more students per teacher than Bakersfield and Montgomery, but it gets us into that range. So that's part of the why behind why I'm asking for us to make that shift there. I also just looked at, if I took the totals of the NMV middle school numbers across the board for next year, we'll be at 249 total middle school students, and then looking at if we added those 2 core teachers, that brings us to 16 total middle school teachers, and that gets us to a 1-to-15 ratio. So it's still not way off, it's not too high, and it's not too low. So it gets us, I feel like, to a sweet spot that's much more equitable across the NMV schools. Morgan is going to share, you've already approved the adding the 2 new teachers. You're at a place tonight where under Morgan's business, he's going to talk to you about where we are in terms of where will we put those students in Sheldon. So that's a big part of the equation, because since they've come to us, as I stated in the beginning, they've grown by 50 students. So last year we had to find a space for an additional 3rd grade classroom, and we had to find a space for an additional preschool classroom. So we were able to do that by carving out pieces of other spaces, but there are no other pieces left. We've used all of the puzzle pieces that are available with the existing space. So Morgan's going to talk through the numbers that we received for both the lease and a purchase of modular classroom spaces, so that we can add the 2 teachers and have additional classrooms for those 2 teachers. So I wanted to give you the data behind that. Any questions on any of that before I move on? So the next piece I have on my agenda is just a legislative update, and I'm just choosing this month to give you three big things that are happening in Montpelier that I think it's important for you to be aware of. The first is, one thing that I'm paying attention to is the Carson v. Macon decision, and this is really a decision that was made related to students with high school tuition money being able to use their tuition dollars to attend religious private schools. Previously, that wasn't allowed. You were not allowed to take public money to go to a religious private school. With the decision related to Carson v. Macon, there are implications to the church versus state. So right now, the way it stands is that public school tuition dollars can go. So we now, in NMV, you are paying for students, I think they're paying the average Vermont high school tuition rate for students to attend Rice, by way of example. And previously that didn't happen. So the question is, what will the Vermont legislature do with that? If we're sending our public tuition dollars to private religious schools or private schools in general, will those schools receiving those public dollars be held to the same standards, be measured the same way public schools are, and be expected to follow the same rules that we have in terms of special education and other factors like that? So that's really what I'm watching for, is to see, okay, now that this is what we're doing in Vermont, now what? Now what are the rules related to that, and how does it compare between public and private? The second thing that I've already tipped you to this piece, the school construction aid and PCB funding, is incredibly important. So the legislature, they have had a moratorium on school construction aid since the early 2000s. So there have not been any proactive investment in public schools when there has been construction projects in the last 20-ish years. It has been fully funded by local communities. So again, there are implications in the ed fund, but there has not been state level construction aid. So they're contending with trying to figure out how they can enact a law that allows them to bring back some form of meaningful construction aid program. So we're waiting to see where that goes. And then the last piece under this section is around the PCB mitigation. So there are already several schools throughout Vermont who have tested above the Vermont threshold for allowable levels of PCB, and it's resulting in them having to take mitigation measures in their schools. So what's up in the air is how those mitigation measures are going to be funded. So the administration has recommended that the state fund 80%, while the schools fund 20%. Which, although that does feel like a pretty large share that the state will be holding, the thing about PCB remediation is there's no way to anticipate that, and you know how you build your budgets. So if you have something really substantial that shows up, the two schools at NMV that could potentially be impacted are Sheldon and Berkshire. So if something substantial shows up there, you're building your budget 18 months in advance, right, of a school year. So you have no way to build that in. So it is a hardship for schools that face the big PCB issues. So the wonder is, will the legislature instead fully fund PCB mitigation? The last piece I'll share about is about early education and childcare. There's a bill in the Senate Education Committee that would essentially reform early education in the state of Vermont. So right now we have, I haven't really even talked to administrators about this. So right now schools have public preschool programs. We have play school for our 3-year-olds and we have preschool for our 4-year-olds. And the way it's set up now, the Agency of Human Services and the Agency of Education both have rules for us, because AHS is connected to everything that's early ed. So what was proposed in the bill is that 4-year-olds would go full-time in public schools. I believe full ADM would be connected to that. And 3-year-olds would be centered more on childcare. And I know that it's unclear to me exactly, I know that there's a push to make childcare more affordable for families, but what that would do is it would untangle the Agency of Education and AHS. So 4-year-olds would become part of the public school system, and the Agency of Education would govern 4-year-olds through high school graduation. Agency of Human Services would focus on birth to 3, which is cleaner to me, and I am very much in favor of that. I think where they are at right now is, I think they received pushback, the Senate committee received some pushback from a couple of stakeholders, and it has caused them a little pause, and there's the potential that they might slow this down. And instead of passing something this year, I think now they're considering exploring a study committee around this. So it remains to be seen what will move related to this, but some of the ideas that have been generated around this are really promising, kind of exciting ideas.
Lynn,
Yeah.
practically, your school's still gonna have to deal with both set of regulations,
No,
because they've got
No.
they've got 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds in the building.
we wouldn't have 3-year-olds anymore.
They wouldn't be in the building.
No. The 3-year-olds would
The
be
4-year-old
served
would be
through the
full-time.
childcare centers, right? And the 4-year-olds would be full-time.
So where would those childcare centers be?
So already you have 3 and 4-year-olds taking partial spots in childcare. I say centers, I don't mean centers.
Yeah.
Programs, like you have childcare in-home and you have center-based programs within the communities. And I have a bunch of data that I didn't pull together for
Yeah.
this, but I had it when I was building testimony last week.
Yeah.
If 4-year-olds no longer need those spots, the idea is that the 3-year-olds would take the other portion of those 4-year-old spots. So families would be paying for childcare for birth to 3. Children would shift to school at 4. And then I think there's work that they would do around childcare affordability from birth to 3 in addition to this. Not as clear on that part though.
Yeah.
Any other questions on that? Okay. So last up is the Berkshire principal hiring. So this board should be very familiar with this process. I don't feel like I need to go as in-depth with you. I will have you click the link, Morgan, though, where it says Berkshire principal hiring. So I'm gonna zoom, oops, sorry. I'll go through rather quickly. We're beginning, our first screening committee meeting is actually tomorrow with the Berkshire team. They will be meeting, their second committee meeting will be March 6th, and they'll be interviewing candidates on March 13th. Your final board interviews for that position are scheduled for March 20th. So I have put this out rather quickly. It's a little shorter than the Sheldon process that we just embarked on, and that's purposeful because we know where we're getting in the hiring season, and I want to make sure that we still have candidates by the time we get to the end of this process. We've got some solid candidates in the pool. I'm pleased with what I see so far, and you still have a little time to see if any other candidates surface. So what I would be looking for the board to do tonight is, one, are you okay with this timeline? Just give me feedback on that. And then the next thing that I would ask is there a volunteer or two that might want to take a crack at looking at the final board interview questions and seeing if there are any modifications that you'd like to make there to those questions? Or you could punt it to me.
Well, Emily and I did the ones in advance of the Sheldon interviews, and we had kind of condensed it to the number that you felt was more reasonable. I mean, we could certainly build off of those questions.
I think that's where our starting place would be. You might not want to make them exactly the same because it's possible that you could see some candidates come through that have seen those questions.
Okay,
They don't know that yet.
okay. Well, since I did most of the last ones for Sheldon, I don't mind circling
Okay.
back. I guess it would then be helpful for me do you have the original document that we started on that had all 20 questions that we then kind of condensed down to the 13? It would be nice for me to see which ones, if we wanted to change it up a little, because it's not as though some of the ones that we excised from the final product weren't good questions.
Yeah.
We were just trying to be more concise. So we might be able to pull in some of those and again.
How about this? How about we wait until after the 13th? And if there are potentially candidates that have seen the questions,
Okay,
we'll revise.
sure.
And if not, if you're comfortable with those questions, we'll.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
yeah, that sounds like a good strategy.
So the last two pieces are, if we end up doing a site visit for a candidate, is there a volunteer from the board that would want to be a part of site visits or helping with reference checks?
I would be willing to do that.
Okay. Which one? Or both?
I could try both. It's really just gonna depend on schedule. So I'm gonna try,
Okay.
see what it looks like.
And I'll have time to do phone calls.
Okay.
I won't be able to do any in-person site visits that week, but I can certainly make reference calls.
Perfect. All right. And then I think, let's go back to my list. I will give, the stakeholders will have the same opportunity that they had in Sheldon to give feedback about what they're looking for in the next principal of Berkshire, and that's something, I don't feel like I need to share that plan with you because you've already just seen this plan as part of your last process, so I will share that data with you though when you get to your final interview round on the 20th. Any questions on the hiring process in Berkshire? Okay, that's all I have for you, Mary.
Great, thank you so much, Lynn. All right, so that brings us to Morgan.
You didn't need any motions on that?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so I had sent out the NMV and SU audits on January 31st to this board. And if you are ready, I would be interested in getting a motion to accept the FY22 NMV audit on the books.
I'll make the motion, to approve the FY '22 audit. By roll, Lisa,
Aye.
Erin,
Aye.
Kat,
Aye.
Miranda.
Aye.
Arlene,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
and Mary is an aye.
I do not need a motion to go after that grant, which I tipped you to. That was something that we were able to work around. So for the FY '23 update, and then anything on the FY '24 budget and upcoming vote next week, I don't have anything to present, but I'm happy to answer any questions that folks have. Okay. I'm just gonna tee up the Sheldon modular bid for you to look at.
Morgan, can you email it, because I can't see the screen?
Sure.
So that I can be looking at it, thank you.
There's not a lot there. So we went out to request bids for modular space at Sheldon related to the need for additional classrooms that Lynn has talked about. We advertised and we put it out to 6 different vendors that we could find online. Unfortunately, we only got one bid back, and you will see that up on your screen in a moment. And so for folks who can't see, we'd asked bidders to propose both a 24 by 60 foot modular and a 48 by 60 foot modular. The 24 by 60 would accommodate 2 classrooms. We might be able to squeeze out a little intervention space there. And then the 48 by 60 would be would give us 4 decent sized spaces to work with. We also asked them to both bid it out as a if we were purchasing the modular or if we were leasing it for 3 years. So for a 24 by 60 unit, which would be a unit for 2 classrooms, to purchase it, it would be $230,000 and change from the one bidder that presented. A 3-year lease total over the 3 years would be $165,000. And if we leased it for 59 months, that's where the tip off is. So 59 months of leasing would be the same as a purchase price. For the 48 by 60, so a unit that would give us 4 classrooms, purchase price is just over $425,000. 3-year lease would be just over $329,000, and the tipping point in that case would be 54 months, so just shy of 5 years. If we left it out there, it would be more advantageous to purchase it. There would be site work involved in that, as well as doing some connections to the electrical system and the alarm system. We would not have to sprinkle the modular building. I talked to Vern today, and we think this site work would be in the $30,000 to $40,000 range, and then the electric work and alarm work would be somewhat less than that. I think from the board's perspective, it's all related to the timeline and how temporary we want to view this solution. Certainly the smaller modular would buy us the space that we need for the 2 middle school classrooms. It basically prevents any additional work that we would have on a larger expansion. similar to a 3-year lease versus a purchase. If we do a 3-year lease, we're really saying we're going to come up with a permanent solution to this problem in Sheldon in 3 years. It's likely that once it's on the ground, the leasing company would be happy to extend it. So that's maybe less of a factor than the choice between 2 rooms or 4 rooms. My feeling, having my background, is that we, in my high school, had modular classrooms that were meant to be temporary and that were probably 20 years old by the time that I graduated. So I think we should be going into that, this discussion with that in mind. We've had some initial looks at Sheldon about, okay, if we were going to do something permanent, you know, where would a logical place could we build off one of the ends? And we think we have an idea of where it would probably make sense to put 4 rooms and some storage. So, you know, I'm happy to answer any questions on this, on the bids. I think we're going to be really looking for guidance from the board about, is this something that really is going to be a temporary fix, and do we envision another bond vote in a few years? Do we envision socking away some pretty significant amounts of capital reserve money with the idea that it is going to go into expanding this building? You know, there are other options on the table. We, you know, as Lynn talked about, we've got some changes coming with pre-K, and if we're going to guarantee pre-K for 4-year-olds full-time, are there going to be more kids coming out of the woodwork, and are we going to need to be looking at expanding that program further? You know, if you only have 10 hours available, you're probably more likely to hold your kids at home or keep them in a private placement. There are no easy answers to any of this, but this is what we've got on the table tonight. Because we only had one bid, there's a process that we have to go through with the state to get approval to accept or to negotiate with that one bidder, because it is a building project and because we did not get 3 bids coming back. So I'll pause there and see if there are any questions on that.
Do we know anybody in Vermont that has gotten modulars from this company? Like anyone that's close enough that like people who are interested would be able to go and view? Because I know Emily and maybe Mary, you know, had concerns about modular versus stick built, and it would just be nice to like see a real one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the references that they listed was for Rutland Northeast. I know that business manager pretty well, and they had just gone out to bid within the last year, and that's who I got this list of bidders from. So I know that they have taken possession and are using a modular, I'm going to say within the last 3 months maybe. I think they maybe moved in, maybe it's 4 months, maybe they moved in November. And so they would certainly be willing to host folks who wanted to go down and see what that was like. And that was from this.
Did he have any like initial feedback for you? Just his, you know, feedback on it?
She's been pretty positive about it when I asked her. I could certainly circle back now that they've gone a few months with kids in that space. They've got at least 2 modulars, and I think they're going out to look for more now because they're in a similar situation where you know, needs are different, and so that's putting space constraints on current buildings.
I feel like we might have photos.
We have a video that I could track down. It was more focused on the building process. They videotaped that for their kids to see and interact with, and I can certainly share that with the board once I find it.
My thought is like we have to look at this as like a more long-term plan, because there's no way in knowing if it'll get approved to do something stick built until it actually goes to vote, right? And I think you bring up a good point, Morgan, in your own experience that you the one that you went to, was 20 years old. So while this might not be ideal for a lot of people, I just think it's realistic to look at this long term and be looking at the larger space, because you just never know when it goes to vote what's going to happen.
So I think what I hear you saying, Kat, is there's both a short-term plan that we need to consider, and we need to keep our eye on what is the long-term solution that we need to be thinking through and contending with, even if we patch a short-term plan in place for now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at this as like, while this is a short-term solution to potentially have this ready for the fall, I think we should also be looking at it as the long-term solution if we're not able to come up with anything else. So getting 2 classrooms just for the fall, but then if it ends up that, we can't get anything more than this, then are we going to regret that we should have gotten, the 4? I mean, that's just kind of how I'm, I guess, looking at it. That this might be a short-term solution that turns into a long-term solution just by default.
I see what you're saying now. I do hope the board will have a serious conversation about exploring the 4, just given the projected increase in the student population, and I know how we would use it already in terms of intervention space and space for special educators. I think that if you want to consider a longer term solution, that the process for doing something like that is, I would say it's at least a couple of years from start to finish.
I agree. I feel like we've already outgrown the 2 classrooms. They're already spoken for
Right.
with our anticipated 8th grade expansion. And then that leaves 0 wiggle room for other changes in the other projected growth, because it's not only the middle school that we're trying to contend with, it's also the overall growth across the schools, across the entire K through 8.
Yeah.
And the potential need for an additional classroom if one of those other classrooms tips the scale and needs to be divided or something like that.
Right.
So I think, for me, it seems as though we already, within this kind of narrow window of just the modular solution, I think we already need to be looking at that larger space. I mean, and it's 2,800, give or take, square feet of space. And when we look at the purchase price, we're talking about 147 a square. Granted, that doesn't factor in some of the site work and plumbing and other things that might need electric heat. I don't know exactly what the balance,
There would not be plumbing. We specifically said we weren't going to go that route because that would be significant
that gets to be
infrastructure work.
significant with
It would be
wastewater and
electric. It would
everything.
likely be some sort of electric heat
Yeah.
for it, and then tying in the alarm system. We know we'll have to do that.
And I wish we had Vern here, because I remember we talked a little bit about that kind of price per square foot in the commercial construction world, and I don't remember exactly what we were talking about. I mean, I know in the residential realm, you're really not building anything for under 250 a square these days. So,
Yeah.
and I suspect it's comparable in the commercial realm. So price per square foot, I mean, certainly the modular approach for a short-term solution is likely the most affordable option compared to something, us building something, and obviously the time frame is more palatable as far as being able to be ready by the fall with these extra classrooms. I still have some of the same reservations around materials and stuff, but again, the priority right now is that we need this space, because there's an urgency around the need for space. And so I'm starting to just kind of look, okay, purchase versus lease. I don't know, I mean, it's not that much more to purchase one of these, and then we have quote unquote kind of equity in the ownership of this, but it doesn't necessarily sound like something we want to lean on this as our long-term solution either. And so that's the kind of tension between lease or purchase. I suppose there's probably a market for selling these if we find down the line that our longer term solution negates the need for this space, for the modular space.
Was there months to own notation, meaning that you can lease to own? Or was that just more for like what that equates to?
It's more that 54 months is if you're gonna lease it for any longer than 54 months, it's basically saying you might as well buy it.
Right. So the 3-year lease was for the 48 by 60 was $329,000. If we end up leasing it for 54 months at that price, then it would be the same price as if we had bought it.
And it's hard because we don't have any kind of crystal ball to exactly know what our long-term solution is going to be and how long is it going to take us to manifest that, especially if it's a larger construction project that's going to necessitate a big bond. And, we have other issues kind of looming around PCBs and other factors across the SU. So it's very hard to know what the long-term solution is going to be. I think we really can only plan for the short-term fix right now.
I think that your long-term, because as you indicated, there are other factors you're gonna have to really think through. I think that would require a study of what are the considerations that you need to think through when you're planning a longer-term solution, I guess.
Yeah.
I think it was Kat or one of you said, would there be a market if the long-term solution didn't really require us to have that? I had a reaction when you said that because right now I wish we had 2 of those because our alternative programs are really desperate for a space.
Right.
That kind of a building could be fitted to really meet the needs quite well for an alternative program. And the other piece is we're looking for a space for staff childcare center, and something like this also could be modified.
Yeah.
So I don't have no idea about building and taking something like that down and moving to a different site, but it seems like there would be a market
Right.
if that wasn't in your long-term plan to keep it.
If I'm hearing you right, you're saying lease is too risky because we could buy it and then reuse it, repurpose it possibly in the near future.
Or if it's not us reusing it, it would be a beneficial space for someone, for something. But right now, if I had an option to have a space like that we could put on a site and put in a childcare center or use it for our alternative programs, we'd be going to the SU board and saying, hey, this is a really good option for us right now. So I suspect that would be.
Right, so there's value in the purchasing of it because even if it's not part of our long-term growth scenario, we certainly could put that investment to use in all these other capacities.
And I mean, leasing it, you're just throwing that money away. We get nothing in return, and if we need it longer, I mean, I just don't see any benefit to leasing. I'm definitely in favor of purchase.
I agree, Kat. I think that if we could have, from our last conversation, we were moving more towards doing that building project, but it sounds like the timeline for that doesn't work for us right now. So I feel like I'm leaning towards that purchasing as well. But how can you, like, in a perfect world, if you started a building project today, what would be the timeline for that?
So we are looking at something at the Cold Hollow Career Center. We will soon be contracting with an architect who's already done some pretty significant work there, looking at different plans. We are hoping to go to a bond vote next March. The architect thinks that's an aggressive timeline. And so if you get a bond vote in March, you're probably not building until the next construction season, because then you have to, get all the specs that you're gonna do going out to bid. So I think 2 years is fast.
Aaron, were
That doesn't,
you asking what would be the timeline if we were to move forward today and purchase the 4 classroom unit? What would our timeline be for getting that in and kids in the building?
no, it was what Morgan was speaking to. It didn't have a really good idea of like when you start a bond vote, how long does that
Okay. process
take for when that finishes, and it just makes sense. That we, instead of leasing, we just purchase, and then we have this, structure that eventually could be moved somewhere else. So I think at least I might be speaking for myself, but the goal is that we have a structure there, that where we don't have a shed, and I know it's not a shed, but that's where we were leaning the last time. But it sounds like this is a timely process, and we need something now.
Correct.
Right, and so the calculus is really isn't choosing between modular and building something ourselves, because as Morgan just illustrated, that's like glacial.
Yeah.
Relative to when we need the structure, which is the start of the school year 2023.
And is there enough time to get it installed? And I mean, I don't know what the word is, but installed by the fall? I mean, is that even an aggressive timeline for the modular structure when you have the groundwork to do, and just, it doesn't sound like a lot, but it is a lot, when you have to have contractors do that, and a lot of them, are they already booked, for this coming summer?
It is an aggressive timeline, but my boss says that we would meet it. And so that's what we're going to try to do if you go that route.
I think it's more realistic that we can do it related to the modular than we could do it related to a build.
I mean, the reality is the goal would be on the first day of school, we would be moving into that space. But if we're in the process, and even if it had to be October 1st, we're gonna come up with a short-term solution, like we would in any construction project, to figure out, okay, we have 2 more teachers and 2 more groups of students, we might need to modify, I mean, off the top of my head, we might need to modify how we're doing art or how we're doing library, or we would have to come up with something. I don't know what it would be, but the goal would be a hard push for the start of the year.
Yeah.
And by way of boss, I think you might have been referring to Vern.
Morgan, remind me where the money from, if we move forward with the purchase of the 48 by 60 to the tune of $425,650, and that doesn't include the balance of systems and the site work, where would the money be coming from in our budget?
So given where I think you're going to end up in terms of tuition kids, we would try to put as much of this in your current year, your FY23 budget as possible. We would need to get the work completed, so that would be, it may not be all the site work. We may get some of that in there. We may get the down payment on the modular in that budget, but we would try to move as much of it as possible in that. I would probably try to make sure that any motion tonight included the ability to use capital reserve funds to the extent that we needed to come up with costs this fiscal year that the general fund couldn't cover. And then we do the same thing coming July 1. We would start out by planning on tucking whatever we can in your general fund budget, and if we get lucky with tuition kids again, we would leave it in there. If not, we would back it into capital reserves.
Don't we already know that we're nearly doubling our high school tuition kids, who's graduating and who's coming in?
We did, but we're budgeting for that.
Okay.
So, every fall there's the game about, where the kids go to school and do
Right.
they have a parent in that town.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, we're assuming, we're making assumptions on what kids you're paying for, but depending on the schools they choose, you may end up not having to pay for them.
Okay, Understood.
You could also have 20 move in over the summer that we don't know about.
Right. And we have enough in the capital reserve to lean on. And did Sheldon come to NMV with a pool of money the way that
No,
Montgomery and
the
Bakersfield
other three
did?
did, and Montgomery and Berkshire still have money left.
Okay,
Bakersfield's we have run out.
okay, and Sheldon doesn't have anything earmarked specifically for that
About
school?
800,000 in capital reserve,
I think that's right.
808 maybe.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right. In the general one.
So the general sense that I'm getting from the board is that we're leaning toward the purchase of the larger space because it's more expeditious and there's value in the equity of purchase as opposed to the leasing option.
Yeah, just a question, Lynn. If you talk 4 years, 5 years down the line about reusing those somewhere else, would you be better off having two of the smaller ones? Or could you put your programs into that big one in the same space?
It's hard to say because we're actively looking for spaces now, so
Yeah,
I'm saying
so hopefully we
if it
find
was
something.
available now, we would want it now.
Yeah,
I don't think that we have even considered having it be in two different pieces. I think that would change your site
Setup and-
work,
yeah.
like how the connectors work. So I wouldn't recommend trying to do two.
okay.
I think they come in modularly. There's got to be a way to like break down those
Possibly.
seams and
Yeah.
take
Yeah.
them out modularly.
So, any more discussion? Or does everyone feel comfortable in having Morgan proceed with this? And Morgan, do you need a motion?
I think it might be good to have a motion to contract with Chiavi for a modular classroom purchase and maybe pending reference checks, and that gives you the opportunities for folks who want to, if we can get you down to Rutland to look at that, that unit that they have there.
Okay. Any further discussion? So if not, I'll make the motion to contract with Chiavi pending the reference checks for the larger 48 by 60 modular classroom space purchase, not lease. We'll do that by roll. Kat,
Aye.
Erin,
Aye.
Lisa,
Aye.
Miranda,
Aye.
Arlene,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
and Mary is an aye.
I think we can discuss using capital reserve funds at a later date. I don't
Okay.
need anything right now.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you all.
I think that's all I have for
That's
tonight.
it for you, Morgan?
Yep.
Okay, great. So principal reports, we have only one of 4 principals here. Rhoda, do you have anything further that you'd like to share or highlight from your board report?
Let's see. I don't think so. We had a good turnout for our John Halligan presentation. I would have liked to see more, but I think those who were here were invested and it was really good.
Yeah.
And definitely when he was here with the kids, it was a moving presentation for them.
I have heard, yeah.
He's coming to Berkshire and Montgomery soon after the break. So do you remember when? I think it's sometime in mid-March maybe.
Yeah, I think so. Well, we also have a math night coming up. We had to reschedule it, so it's now gonna be right after break here on the night. Hoping to have a good turnout.
Fun.
Is that because someone called the snow day?
Yep.
All right, thanks, Rhoda, appreciate it. So that brings us to our board business. First up is the Bakersfield after-school program. Morgan and Rhoda are gonna share updates on that with the board.
Yeah, so we had about 10 kids, or we are having about 10 kids this week here for our daycare after-school program that's running between, and that's with a little bit of a hike in pricing, and I think they're doing another price hike over April break. So we'll see how that goes. But the intent is to get us up to a little bit better pricing to hopefully be more sustainable over time.
Let me just set a little context first while we're having this conversation. So we came to the board, I think it might have been December, and had the conversation about whether or not the ASP program is a sustainable program in Bakersfield. And there were people that came and spoke about the history and where it came from. And I think that the decision was made at that time to really look at what's the fee structure for those off weeks and summer, because you haven't moved it for very long, and we were a little bit worried about what the numbers looked like during that first quarter and a half or 2 quarters of the school year. So the goal for tonight was to come back and to be able to have Morgan give a report out on what do those numbers look like now. We know where our starting point was of what money you were carrying forward. What does that number look like now? We were interested in knowing if there was participation drop with the rate increase, and it doesn't sound like there was this time. And then the board was just gonna be asked, do we sustain as long as this program is operating without the board having to invest money? Are you good with continuing to sustain the program? Hope that helps for context.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's a good refresher for sure, since it's been a couple months since we talked about it at length.
Were you able to
Morgan,
look
do you
at
have
this?
numbers?
Morgan?
I was. I can put it up, but it'll maybe be too small to read. So this fiscal year so far, the program revenue, which is a mix of parent fees and grants, to date is $22,700, and the expenses are $23,700. So it's about $1,000 off, or $1,000 less revenue than expenses, and it started the year with about $14,000 in the bank. So it had built up a fund balance specific to the program.
So that 1,000 off, it doesn't account for where they started.
Correct.
Okay. So they still have a fund balance.
They would,
Yes.
if the year ended today, they would still have a fund balance of $13,000.
And you're thinking of a price hike again
In
for April?
Yeah.
See how that worked out to us.
So April and then summer.
Yes, and the summer, yeah.
And so it sounds as though in the moment, it largely is self-supporting. I mean, the issue would be if that fund balance started to kind of be dipped into over time and revenue didn't increase, but it sounds as though there's some price increases trying to pull in more revenue.
I'm encouraged by the gap was worrisome to me when we
Yes.
looked at it this last time, because we had dipped in about, I think, $4,000 the last time we had looked at it. So now to see that it's 1,000 without considering that balance, I think the outcome looks much better right now.
And I do think it kind of ebbs and flows throughout the years, and throughout the year anyway. It's tended to do that.
And so it seems as though, I mean, certainly for this upcoming year, there's, in my estimation, there'd be no reason to not, because clearly we have enough in the fund balance and the revenue is enough even prior to the price increases to carry it through another year without needing any input from the NMV budget. I mean, maybe it's something that we need to just kind of look at every year and have this conversation on an annual basis so that we are staying ahead of any problems that might be arising from a fiscal perspective.
That makes sense.
Well,
I mean, I know it's hard in a way because it doesn't necessarily give people like total confidence that they can year after year after year rely on this. And I know how important it is in a small rural community to have reliable childcare, but that just may be how it needs to go on a somewhat annual basis so that we don't run into problems.
Well, and I think if it's done like it is now at this time of year, that gives parents enough time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
You know, if we wait later, yeah, that'd be a
Right.
concern, but.
so I could put it to come back to every March,
Yeah.
if this is the month that works.
do we need a motion on that?
I don't think so, I think it was just you wanted to
Yeah.
look at it and you're not
Right.
making any changes, so I don't think you need a motion.
Great, okay, good,
Thank you.
absolutely, you're welcome. So, our next meeting is in March. We'll be reorganizing the board and focusing on our Berkshire Elementary principal hire. Does anyone have any future agenda items they are aware of now?
You said March, but you meant April, right? Just confirm.
No, isn't there a March?
Or is there one right after
This is
the,
March.
This is the
It says.
Well,
We
this is,
have the
so
20
it's
we
our
have the 20th.
special, we're doing the one on the 20th
Oh, yeah.
for the Berkshire
Okay.
principal, but because it's gonna be after, town meeting day, we'll need to reorganize, so it's technically a special meeting.
And I will not be in state on that day. So, if I ever.
And then our April meeting is April 5th. Yeah, the timing is a little funky with the break and town meeting and stuff this time around.
I'm sorry, Mary, could you repeat those dates? It's March 20th and then April 5th?
Yeah, so Monday, March 20th is our next meeting. It's technically a special meeting, and we'll be largely focusing on Berkshire principal hiring interviews. But we'll also need to reorganize because it will be our first meeting post-town meeting day.
Okay, thank you, that's the part I missed.
And
Thank you.
then our regular meeting, next regular scheduled meeting will be April 5th.
Where are those meetings gonna be?
Berkshire, we'll do the
Berkshire for the
Berkshire one, or the
Berkshire, the
one on the 20th will be in Berkshire.
I think the next one is too.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we are scheduled for.
Yeah,
It's been so long since we
I
had.
believe we
here
go
and then we go
alphabetically,
Berkshire,
so.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, so both of the next meetings in Berkshire. I don't have an SU board report because we didn't have a formal SU meeting in February, just had that very quick special meeting. So there's nothing to cover there. Any final questions from anyone before we adjourn? All right, so I'll make a motion to adjourn. All in favor?
I.
Thank you all so much.